Episodio número 100. Los valores de BNI aún son muy importantes.
Estáis escuchando los podcasts de Somos BNI por Tiago Enríquez Acuña, director nacional de BNI España SLC. En cada podcast, Tiago nos dará consejos y trucos para que puedas sacar el máximo provecho a tu participación en BNI. No dejes de estar conectado. Sigue cada uno de nuestros podcasts que te ayudarán a ser un experto en networking. Muchas gracias por escucharnos.
Buenos días, Tiago.
Hola, buenos días, Alejandra.
¿Cómo estás? Cuéntame.
Yo estoy fenomenal. Nos acompaña hoy para celebrar nuestro podcast número 100 el Doctor Iván Misner, fundador y jefe visionario de BNI. Welcome, Ivan, to our podcast.
Buenos días.
Bienvenido.
Welcome, Iván. Pues hoy festejaremos que es el podcast número 100, que tenemos 5.000 oyentes que siguen nuestros podcasts y además que nos han llegado estas semanas muchísimos mensajes de nuestros miembros que los escuchan y nos agradecen por logros que han obtenido gracias a los podcasts que escuchan.
Yeah, so Ivan and Alejandra is saying that we have a lot of people that get in touch with us and that in Latin America and Spain and also the United States, they thank us for our the learning they get from our podcasts. So it's really a pleasure for you to speak to the Spanish-speaking community of BNI members.
It truly is a pleasure, and I am so pleased that BNI is operating in so many countries, in so many languages, and I'm particularly pleased to see you doing a podcast in Spanish. Congratulations on 100 episodes, and congratulations on doing this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pues vamos a comenzar con el podcast de hoy. No sé si lo has elegido tú o lo he elegido Iván, pero vamos a hablar de los valores de BNI, de los valores que nos distinguen, de nuestro modelo de negocio como BNI. ¿Y tú crees que siguen siendo importantes esos valores?
Por supuesto que sí. Ivan, we chose this, I think that there is no better time to speak about the BNI values and to hear from you if whether or not they are still relevant. I would imagine you say so, but what's your opinion? Are they still relevant in today's situation, with this, worldwide situation and challenges? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, in crisis, core values are more important than ever. You see, core values are the DNA of a company. It's what creates a culture for a business, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture is so critical, and the foundation of that culture is the core values. And so, yes, the core values, a company that is living its core values during crisis is much more likely to survive the crisis than those companies that do not. So, yes, without a doubt, core values of the company are very important and alive and well in BNI.
Yeah. So could we go very briefly through the core values and have a comment on how these core values are important to today's situation where there's all these economical challenges, not just today, but perhaps today and tomorrow and the year afterwards. So could you comment on, could we go through them?
Yes, and I'll hit one at a time, and if you have some comment about it, feel free to share as I go through them.
Okay, please.
First, our principal core value, our philosophy as an organization is givers gain. And we implemented that into BNI very early on because I realized that most networking was very transactional. Hi, Alejandra, let's do business. Let's they go right into sales mode, or hi, Tiago, let's do business, as opposed to making a connection and helping people. And so givers gain was really the first of the core values within the organization. And it's important to note that it is a standard that we must apply to ourselves, not a stick that we hit other people with. It's something that we have to live, not force other people to live.
I totally agree. And in today's environment, it's now more than ever, people have to come together and to help each other. And what a better philosophy to do that than through givers gain.
Yes, and it's important to know that you may not be able to help everybody, but you can help somebody, and that's the core of the giver's gain philosophy.
Totally agree.
The second of the core values is building relationships.
Yeah.
And I knew early on in BNI that this was really not about the transaction, it was about the relationships. And what's really funny is that sometimes I hear people, or I'll read articles from people that they'll say, networking is dead. It's all about relationships. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're going about this wrong. The way to make networking work is to make it all about relationships. Relationships are the foundation of a powerful network. So they're not different. It's not either or, it's both and. You have to build relationships in networking.
Absolutely. And I'm a bit surprised, I would say. Well, surprised, but not that surprised, because at least here in Spain ourselves, we're having a strong growth in when it gets to core chapters, new chapters that we are preparing. And that for me is based on the people coming to realize that they need this relationship so they can thrive in the future. So it's really when these times of scarcity, happen, it's very good to have strong relationships where you can depend on. Yeah.
Today more than ever, you need your network, you need your relationships. So the third of the core values is lifelong learning. And I've always been a believer in lifelong learning. If you are not continually improving, you will stagnate. And when you stagnate, your competition, they eat your lunch. You have got to be constantly improving your game and your business. I've never gone to a conference or never gone to an event where I didn't pick up some either new idea or new approach to an existing idea. And so lifelong learning is critical. And podcasts like this help with lifelong learning.
Totally agree. And also, I think nowadays there is this opportunity where you have to reinvent your business. You have to come up with different solutions, and perhaps not only the learning you might get from BNI, but also the learning you might get from your fellow members. On a contact sphere or a power team, there are people who can help you to reinvent or relocate your business, reposition it, so that you can be successful in the months and years to come.
Yeah, very, very true. So one of our original core values was the fourth one, traditions plus innovation, and we are living this right now. I think a successful organization has traditions. These are the traditions that a group of people, that a tribe talks about. This is how we got to where we have gotten. But at the same time, you need to have innovation. And innovation is where you want to go. The traditions are who you are as a group and where you've come from, but the innovation is where you want to go. And, we've had this as one of our core values for decades. And boy, with BNI Online, this is the classic example of how innovation is important and how that you have to embrace innovation while maintaining your traditions.
Yeah, totally agree. In 2 weeks' time, I think that most countries were able to change from classic venue meetings to 100%, more than 10,000 chapters. They were online in weeks.
I am so proud of this organization. I am blown away by how quickly the organization made that transition. And I have to give a shout out to the CEO of BNI.
Absolutely.
He was looking around a corner. He saw this before anyone else. He saw this before I saw it. And he started making the transition in countries that were first affected by the COVID virus and started transitioning very quickly. So I'm very impressed, and the innovation has been incredible. And I'm just very proud of BNI.
Kudos to Graham. Yeah, he was here also by the week when we changed the brand. So also our guest is exactly sharing with us why now is about the growing forward together. And what about the fifth value, Ivan?
Positive attitude. Nothing great in life has ever been done without, I think, a positive attitude. And it's one of the things that I've historically seen as critically important for successful people at networking. I've done several surveys over the last 35 years asking people what makes a great networker. And one of the top two, every time I've done the survey, one of the top two is positive attitude. People want to do business with people who have a positive attitude. It's easy to be critical. It's easy to be negative, but it's successful to be positive. No one has ever built a statue to a critic. It's the people who have vision and who are positive that make a difference in the world.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I see that nowadays I come to visit a lot of chapters because it's online, and really it's amazing how things change if a member or a chapter has on average more positive attitude than others. It's really essential for coping with the challenges we have today.
And I think hope is more powerful than fear.
Absolutely.
And when one has hope and takes action, hope plus action leaves fear in the dust. And so those two things help create a positive attitude, even when times are tough.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And so recently, 2 core values were added to the initial 5. Could you please share with us the 2 last core values of BNI?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that the 2 values that were added later, accountability and recognition, were actually part of the BNI structure from day one. And there were things that I thought about, but when we came up with the list of our core values, they for whatever reason didn't get included. But accountability was part of BNI from day one. We tracked referrals. We tracked attendance in the very first chapter that existed, which by the way is still around. Chapter number 1, they now have changed their name to the Founders Chapter, and they meet in the Arcadia, Pasadena area. It's still in existence today, and accountability was there on day one. Accountability, this isn't a social organization. This is a business organization. And we need to have relationships, but it truly is about business. And so you have to have accountability. I like to say, I don't know that if this works in Spain well, but I like to say that hockey without rules would be boxing on ice. You need to have rules. You need to have systems. And BNI has that. And accountability has been part of BNI from day one.
Yeah. So, and that leads us to our last core value. Recognition.
Yeah, and that too was part of the first chapter in 1985. I realized that recognition was critical, and I'll tell you where that concept came from for the way we recognize people. I had worked with Ken Blanchard, who had written the book, The 1 Minute Manager, his company. I had worked with them on doing trainings, and one of the things that he talks about in the 1 Minute Manager is recognition, is 1 minute praisings. And so I incorporated into BNI this concept of short, sweet, very direct praisings or recognition, to recognize people that are doing things right, catching people doing things right rather than wrong. And that is, and I think, an important core value of BNI. And although it was added to our formal core values later, it was part of BNI from day one. And that's why we added them, because it's one of those things where, like, how could we not have that in our core values? And
totally agree. And since the beginning in the agenda, there was a specific point today as well in our BNI online agenda that is about recognition. And just sharing a small story. The other day I was at a chapter, and people were thanking. They were praising the person who got more referrals and more guests, and people started crying. They were so emotional about this member that specifically dedicated because his business, he was on the cleaning business, and because of sanitation cleaning, he was doing well. And so he said, I'm so thankful that I have to help my members. And so, in the beginning of May, first week, the chapter thanked him for being the notable networker. And people were crying because they say, what this guy did to help us really helped me to understand that there is a way out of this. And as you know, in Spain, the situation was very dire. And and it was very emotional. You know, I must say I also got emotional with this as well.
And do you see how recognition also touches upon at least two other core values? It touches upon the building relationships.
Absolutely.
Because when you have that kind of bond and that kind of recognition, it enhances the relationships. And it absolutely touches upon the positive attitude and the focus on what can be done rather than what can't be done. I think hope is about listening to that inner ear, that inner voice that tells you that something can be done rather than listening to all of the screams around you about what can't be done. And recognition helps to do that.
Tiago, pues quiero comentarte a ti, a Iván, que a mí dos de los valores de BNI que más en los últimos meses más me han llamado la atención fueron la innovación, porque BNI se adaptó rápidamente a una situación nueva y eso llenó de una actitud positiva a todos los miembros. Yo creo que los valores de BNI hacen que cuando cumplimos uno, los otros se vayan cumpliendo de forma sistemática. Y pues la actitud positiva fue muy importante en todo este proceso porque hizo que muchos miembros pudieran seguir adelante, pudieran darle la vuelta a sus negocios y pudieran seguir perteneciendo a un grupo que les ayuda a generar más negocio.
So Alejandra was saying that she would like to underline two core values in this situation. The first one was traditions plus innovation, because we were able, as an organization, to change from venue meetings to online meetings. But then this also led to positive attitude, because now people saw that they could do business. There was this business window. And so Alejandra was giving her testimonial on how these two core values were very important to her as a member.
And that's why core values are more important than ever and make the difference between successful organizations and unsuccessful organizations.
Yeah. So Ivan, as a wrap up, there is this story that comes to my mind again and again. It was, you shared this story. We were having dinner after I was like a national director summit, still in Long Beach. And you shared the story about an amazing meeting. You'll share the story. So and it just personifies, that in a dire situation, in a very, very demanding situation for a member, how a chapter come to react. Could you please share this story? Because I think it's a huge inspiration to everybody who's listening to us.
It was one of the most meaningful meetings I ever attended. And it was in the parking lot of a restaurant, because there had been the Northridge earthquake years ago in Southern California. And the restaurant where the chapter met had been condemned. And it happened the night before. I mean, it was a couple of days after the earthquake, but the night before, an inspector said this restaurant's not safe and condemned it. And so when people showed up in the morning, they didn't know that the restaurant wasn't open. But there was somebody from the restaurant there to tell people, we're so sorry, but the restaurant, there's been structural damage and you can't meet here. And so as people were arriving, they said, okay, let's meet in the parking lot. And I stood there in a circle of almost 30 members and visitors. There were a couple of visitors. And we stood in a circle with cars around us. And we held a BNI meeting in the parking lot of this restaurant. And it was, it was different than some of them, because rather than the weekly introduction, what happened was people went around and said how they're doing. That was the president said, tell us how you're doing. Is everyone okay? Is your family safe? How are you doing? And everyone around and shared their stories, and it just pulled on the heartstrings, and it was amazing. And then towards the end of the meeting, what they did was, in addition to referrals, because if referrals they gave them, they wanted to make sure to give referrals, but in addition to referrals, the president said, talk about anything you need.
Yeah.
Not just referrals, but is there something you need that we can help you with? And people talked about how they didn't have running water, or they had one challenge or another challenge, or they had to leave their home because of the damage. And members stepped up and said, look, we have guests, we have extra bedrooms. You can come stay at our house. We'll bring you water. We'll do this, we'll do that. Watching the members support each other just practically brought me to tears. It was just amazing to watch how our members came together during one of the most difficult times I had ever seen in Southern California.
Yeah, so that story, I even repeated on my director training, because it's really an inspiration. It's a similar situation, people in a very difficult situation, they come together, they share the BNI values, although back then perhaps they were not the 7 values, but as you mentioned, they were also already a part of the organization. And it was just, I think it's an amazing story. You are a wonderful storyteller, and it's an amazing story that I hope will serve as an inspiration to all our listeners here today.
And now we're doing it globally. We're having a crisis globally, and I'm seeing members come together, supporting each other all around the world. This is truly humbling to me to watch.
Yeah, well, for me as well, I would imagine to you. Well, Ivan, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for being with our 100th podcast. It was really a pleasure to have you here. It was a pleasure and an absolute honor. And I was just, as a wrap-up, a final wrap-up, could you please, something you would like to say to our Spanish-speaking listeners and members?
Yes, stay healthy. We will help you stay connected. This is a time to activate your network and work your network. Those people who are doing that, when we are let out of what I call the great pause, I don't like to call it lockdown, I call it the great pause, because the pause button has been hit for all of us. When we are let free from the great pause, BNI members will be far ahead of other people, because we have continued to build our relationships and deepen our network.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for being here with us.
Thank you, Tiago. Thank you, Alejandra.
Thank you, Ivan. Ha sido un placer escuchar a Iván hoy, como siempre, un mensaje inspirador para todas las personas que tenemos un comercio, un negocio, una empresa, y sabemos que se puede, que podemos seguir adelante y que juntos lo haremos mucho mejor. Nos despedimos hasta el próximo podcast, Tiago.
Sí, hasta la próxima. Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
Gracias a todos por escucharnos 100 podcasts y esperemos tener muchísimos 100 más.
Muchas gracias por escucharnos. Este podcast está apoyado por infomate.com, empresa especializada en diseño web, tiendas online y marketing digital. Miembro orgulloso de BNI. Escucha nuestros podcasts en los que compartiremos experiencias, anécdotas y herramientas que te permitirán generar más negocio para tu empresa.